don't seem to understand. Earth isn't yours to conquer.
Hey yo, turn the f down, yo. You sitting there playing with the
ULTRAKILL and Invincible have been my favorite franchises for quite a bit now. Today, I want to explore one of the dumbest but also most fun ideas I've had in a while. How would V1 fare against the Guardians of the Globe and Omni-Man from Invincible? Okay, I get it. For the sake of the argument, we're assuming that V1 is fully upgraded. It has access to all of the arms, utilities, and weapons. The playing field is neutral. Let's say Angstrom Levy had some kind of mess up and now V1 gets thrown into the Guardians' headquarters. One life and no backups for anyone. Just one rage-fueled robot against a rip-off Justice League and a genocidal Viltrumite dad. It's gonna be a 1v1 fight against every contestant. Kind of like a really fucked up boss rush even Haikido was too sober to conjure up. Now, before we start throwing punches, let's quickly break down the rules. V1 will be facing off against the Guardians one by one, ending with the GOAT, Omni-Man. Every showdown will be rated in a tier list of sorts, from A meaning V1 absolutely wipes the floor with them, and F being he gets destroyed without much effort. Now, if you've clicked on this video, you know who V1 is and what it's capable of. It's the pinnacle of human military engineering, a relentless machine thriving off of carnage and blood, literally. Like in the game, V1 can only regenerate health when in contact with blood, and is actually quite fragile compared to other machines in its universe. It compensates for that by being extremely maneuverable, with superhuman battle IQ and processing times. It also has a wide range of weapons to choose from to absolutely pummel the enemy with all the different variants of arms and weapons. So it's needless to say that V1 is a powerhouse. Okay, let's start things off with Red Rush. He's fast, that's basically his whole deal. And in Invincible, we actually see just how stupidly fast he is. Against his showdown with Omni-Man, he was weaving around the battlefield like it's a joke, and even managing to land a bunch of hits before his skull got liquefied. But how does that speed stack up against V1? The thing is, V1 is also built for speed. Slides, jumps, slide jumps, whatever. It's not that just it's fast, it's everywhere and it's built to kill. Unlike Red Rush, V1 doesn't need to think about fatigue, breath, or hesitation. It just calculates. Even if Red Rush gets the jump, V1 can tank a few hits and clap back with a rail cannon to the gut or a projectile-boosted shotgun shell right through the cranium. But here's the kicker, Red Rush doesn't bleed a lot, at least not until the end. So if Red Rush fights smart, avoids damage, and keeps the pressure up, V1's fragility could be its downfall. It's basically a coin toss. In the end, Red Rush has to be lucky every time. V1 only has to be lucky once. Even if it's fragile, V1 is still much more durable than the fleshy Red Rush, and has a whole arsenal dedicated exactly to just basically fucking disintegrating meat. So I'll give this showdown a C rank. If Red Rush fights like he did against Omni-Man, it's game over, but if he is smarter, then it's more debatable. Now on to Warwoman. Imagine Wonder Woman with a bigger temper and fewer speeches. She's strong enough to trade blows with Omni-Man for a few seconds and not get completely flattened, which says a lot. Armed with a massive enchanted mace and enough raw strength to level buildings, she's no pushover. V1 on the other hand strives off of momentum, and if we assume that Warwoman bleeds enough to keep the machine alive, that gives V1 a very high fighting chance. The trick here for V1 is to stay mobile, bait attacks, and keep her in the blood loop. Warwoman's melee focus plays into V1's strengths. Parries, shotgun juggling, and maybe even weapons like the jackhammer. All of these are viable tools in tight quarters. The key here is surviving the first few swings. If V1 can get the fight going long enough to make her exhausted and keep her bleeding, it can keep the pressure up and outdamage her until she drops. But make no mistake, if Warwoman lands a clean mace hit, V1's gonna be a smear of oil on the wall. So I'd say it's also a C. It's definitely a winnable fight, but V1 has to work for it. One mistake and it's lights out. Aquarius is, well, the Aquaman of the world. Which is to say, kinda lame on the surface, but surprisingly deadly if you let your guard down. In the Invincible show, Aquarius can generate high-pressure jets of water and manipulate them with alarming precision. He's also strong and durable enough to hold his own for a moment against Omni-Man, although let's be honest, he did die on the first fucking hit. Still, giving him the benefit of doubt, assuming that he can summon water from anywhere, he's no joke as a supportive element. Now, as we've seen, V1 doesn't short-circuit at the sight of a puddle. His components are great against Hell's harshest slayers, especially in Wrath, where we can see it pretty much be resistant to water. So it's not going to do much, and even if it did, V1 has tanked worse. The bigger issue here is the pressure and crowd control. Aquarius' water attacks can potentially displace V1, push it into environmental hazards, or slow it down just enough for a finishing blow. But the moment V1 gets close, it's over. Aquarius' body is very squishy compared to his teammates. He bleeds, he staggers, he probably crumples under a single point-blank knuckle blaster hit. And let's not pretend he's that great at hand-to-hand combat. If or when V1 closes the gap, the fight's gonna look like a blender going off in a fish tank. So it's a straight A. Aquarius gets absolutely fucking demolished. Darkwing is the Guardian's resident stealth and tech specialist, part ninja, part gadget guru. He's fast, smart, and equipped with an arsenal of high-tech weaponry designed for hit-and-run tactics and disrupting enemy attacks. Also, his agility makes him really hard to pin down, and he's got a knack for controlling the battlefield with things like maybe smoke bombs, grappling hooks, and those rip-off batarangs. Against V1, Darkwing's speed and gadgets would definitely give him some early advantages. Keeping his distance, jamming V1's sensors, and striking him from the shadows could for a second disorient or maybe even slow down the machine. But V1 learns fast. Darkwing's gadgets might temporarily disrupt V1, but he can't keep running forever, and the moment V1 corners him, all that tech isn't going to save him from the brutal close quarters damage. Plus, V1 may have some durability against electronic interference, which means Darkwing's tricks might not be as effective as he'd like. So it's a B rating. Darkwing can survive and harass V1 for a while, but ultimately, it's only delaying the inevitable. Next, Martian Man's psychic powers are impressive, but against V1, they might as well be decorations. This machine doesn't have a mind to manipulate. No, we're not talking about that right now. So, the usual mind games and telepathic assaults are completely off the table. Instead, Martian Man would have to heavily rely on his physical abilities, especially his shapeshifting and super strength, to maybe restrain V1 as he did with Omni-Man. Trying to immobilize V1 is a very smart move actually. If Martian Man can lock down V1, restrict its movement, and prevent it from getting those close-range, blood-fueled attacks in, he stands a real chance in wearing it down. But here's the catch, V1's durability and very fast learning means it won't stay trapped for too long. Its relentless will to survive combined with brutal mechanical strength means it will keep fighting back and finding weaknesses, tearing free or breaking restraints. So if Martian Man does manage to hold on, the battle becomes a test of endurance. Martian Man's alien physiology can take quite a beating, but V1's ferocity and constant blood intake for a generation might slowly tip the scale in its favor. Still, the longer Martian Man can contain and restrain V1, the better his chances. The Immortal, basically a human-sized, less intense version of Omni-Man. He can hit hard, fly fast, and take a serious beating thanks to his ability to be resurrected by outside help. This makes him a sort of tougher opponent than you might first think, especially compared to the other Guardians. At face value, his durability and aerial mobility means he can stay in the fight longer and can even match V1 in his maneuvers. However, despite these perks, Immortal still lacks the speed to match up against V1's brutal efficiency. Even with his centuries worth of experience, V1's rapid, unpredictable attacks and bloodthirsty regeneration would keep Immortal on the defensive. His flight could help him avoid some damage, but V1's arsenal and relentless aggression would make it difficult for Immortal to maintain control of the fight like he's used to. So, while Immortal's durability and flight makes him a more than respectable opponent, he is still outmatched in terms of range damage and basically even sheer damage output. But he's persistent and could potentially be the kind of threat that could put V1 in real trouble. So I'll give this kind of a low C. He is tougher thanks to flight and the resurrection powers, but he's basically still outmatched in terms of ferocity and speed. Now for the Green Ghost, the Guardian with the power of invisibility and intangibility, making her one of the sneakiest threats on the team. She can vanish from sight, phase through walls, and strike quickly before disappearing again. On paper, that sounds like a nightmare for V1, whose combat style depends on the fact that he can see the opponent. But V1 is built different. While Green Ghost can invade physical attacks by phasing, V1's relentless aggression and maybe even sensory feedback from all the blood he's spilling might eventually give it an edge in tracking her movements. Plus, V1's arsenal includes weapons that aren't purely physical, explosive rounds and area damage that can affect spaces she tries to slip through. So while invincibility and intangibility give her a significant tactical advantage, they don't necessarily guarantee a clean victory, especially considering her lack of direct damage output. Still, Green Ghost's hit-and-run style tactics could frustrate V1 and drag the fight out, wearing down the bloodthirsty machine over time. Without sustained hits to keep regenerating, V1's one-life fragility might start to show, so this fight could go either way, depending on how well she controls distance and timing. So again, I'll give this maybe even a high C. Green Ghost is highly evasive and really tricky to get hang of, and very capable of frustrating V1, but very, very vulnerable if caught.
Had enough yet?
I'll stop you.
I'm ready when you are.
And finally, Omni-Man. Nolan is easily the most dangerous opponent V1 can face in this showdown, and honestly the closest thing to an absolute nightmare to fight. Omni-Man brings an entirely different level of power, Vultramite strength, speed, flight, and near invulnerability that far outclasses anything V1 has faced so far. From the start, Omni-Man's combat experience and brutal efficiency put V1 at an immediate disadvantage. His ability to basically fly circles around V1 and deliver punches with planet-shaking force means that even a single hit could critically disable or even destroy V1 outright. Unlike most enemies in ULTRAKILL who fall to repeated strikes, Omni-Man's overwhelming strength and durability allow him to shrug off hits that would stall other foes, making it nearly impossible for V1 to whittle him down over time. Now, V1's regeneration powers means it won't go down quietly. It might just be able to land a few cheeky shots to recover some health in the process, but that's just a brief flash of resistance. With Omni-Man controlling the fight's pace, striking from the air and dodging most attacks with ease, V1's window to inflict meaningful damage is incredibly narrow, even if V1's strength and persistence would be comparable to that of the Reaniman, who have been shown to give Omni-Man a hard time. The moment Nolan lands a solid hit, it's basically over. In a one-life, no-respawn fight, this matchup heavily favors Omni-Man. V1's determination for survival makes it a challenging opponent for sure, but against a Vultramite warrior of Omni-Man's caliber, it's a losing battle from the start. The brutal reality is that Omni-Man's raw power and tactical skill would absolutely dominate, most of the time ending the fight before V1's bloodlust and regeneration could turn the tide. This is probably one of the first fights that V1 has that meets his match, and the Vultramite's dominance would be nearly absolute. So it would be an F, or in the very, very best case scenario, a D. Omni-Man would win decisively. And that's it for today's showdown. V1 versus the original Guardians of the Globe, plus the ever-intimidating Omni-Man. It's wild to imagine how a relentless killing machine would stack up against some of the toughest heroes out there, but hopefully this gave you a fresh perspective on just how brutal and unpredictable these fights can be. If you've enjoyed this theory crafting session, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me who you want to see V1 take on next. As always, this was Cold Brew, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao!